or anything?
Uh, no, bro. I think I'm good with the last class and the recordings. Yeah.
Okay, so today we are going to continue with our workflow class.
Okay.
Let me share my screen. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, let's go and see what you have. So you can launch workflow administration from site, org, and container
Container.
level. Let's start with org. Okay, go to utilities and workflow template administration. So this is where we have all of our workflows out of the box and custom one. And also you can see the context, from which context we have created the workflow. TBCT is our org level, and site means we created the workflow at site level. Most of the workflows are here out of the box, but there are a few we created for our business process. And if you see this little icon, it means someone else have checked out that workflow wherever for any object, WT part, WT document, EPM document. If you checked out, let's say I check out this and it will be in a yellow color. So this is checked out to me. You can also do undo checkout. So I cannot edit this workflow until this guy checks in. Okay, basic things. Last week, we see a simple workflow with one task and this is state robot. Now we will see different options available in this workflow. And you have any questions on that simple workflow that we created? Let's see if we have that workflow here. So to view the workflow, you don't need to always edit it. You can do view workflow definer. So without checking it out, it will open the view only mode. So this is a simple workflow for a design review. So your design reviewer will update the part and he will send it for approval. The approver can either approve or clarify. If he select clarify, it will come back to the review part. We made this as a loop link because this is a loop. So to reinitiate the connector, we made it as a loop link. And once he approves it, it will go to set state and set state to released. And it will end the workflow. So any questions on this, Mahesh?
No, bro. I'm good. Yeah.
Okay.
Till the workflow. Yeah.
Okay. The workflow should start with the start flag. And it can have more than one end flag, but it always preferred to have one end flag. Okay, so in rare case, we have more than one end flag. And to connect the different icons, we use this action connector. So it will connect. Sometimes it won't work, but you have to keep trying. Okay. So to delete a connector or any object, select it and click delete. Okay, this is the first one. And if you're in this action connector, to select the object, go to this pointer and you make the selection. Just a minute, someone is pinging me. I'll be back in a minute. Okay. Now let's delete this. this is an activity. So this is the only option available to assign a task to a user. All these things are system driven, and this is the only activity we can assign it to the user. If someone want to perform a task logging into Windchill, use this activity. Okay, let's open this activity. This is activity properties. So in general, we have the activity name. And who is the responsible role for this activity? Because we can select a participant. So we have users, groups, roles, teams, and variables. We'll see all these things. But let's say if I assign it to a role, let's say if I assign it to the AR author role, and there is no user part of that role, then where should this activity should go? To whom it should be assigned? Then it will be assigned to the process initiator. That's why we have the responsible role. So who is responsible if the workflow couldn't resolve the participant? If it couldn't assign the task to any users, then what should happen? It should come back to the responsible role. So here also we have either process initiator, or process initiator is nothing but who initiate this workflow. If I create a part and a part is associated to a life cycle and life cycle has its workflow, then the creator of the part is the process initiator. But I can also change this to different roles here. And description for this activity. Okay, so this tells what this activity is about. Okay, but this won't be displayed for the user. This is just to give others information about what this activity is about, and to give some instructions of what the user needs to do. Okay, that's where the instructions come in, the activity. Okay, in the task page, they will see this instruction. So usually they follow the instruction and perform the task. When we say signing required, an electronic signature is required to complete the task, because there are many processes which requires e-signature. So to get that e-signature, when we say signing required, then uh, that user needs to enter his password to complete his task and send notification when a task is generated. It will send an email notification to the user, means the participant, that they have a task assigned. Okay, so this is where we select the participant. Either you can directly assign it to an individual user. Rare case we does that. We usually don't assign it to the individual user. Mostly we use roles or groups. And if the participant needs to be assigned at runtime, okay, let's say I'm creating a part, and in the part there is an attribute called document owner, where the user selects some user part of the document owner, and I want that document owner user value to be assigned for a task. Then what we need to do is we create an expression robot, and we create a variable here. Okay. And we update this. If you see, the type of the variable is WT user. WT user refers an individual user in Windchill. Okay, so any person who has an account in Windchill is a WT user. In this expression, we call a Java API we invoke the Java API, and we query the document attribute value, and we get that value from that attribute, and we assign that value to this WT test user uh, variable. And here in this activity, if we go to the participant variables, uh, we map the test user here. This will be little overwhelming, but okay, I'm just giving a use case, and we assign this user. So this is where we have this variable. Okay, so the use case is while creating a document. Let's do the creation. So I will show this when we start coding. When you start developing codes, I'll show you how to invoke a API from a workflow expression, and we'll see the same use case there. See document owner. So I can select a user here, and I want this user to be a participant for this activity. So I cannot configure it because that value comes at runtime. So how do we map that? We create a variable at a process level using the properties, and we create a local variable at the activity and use the expression to get that value, the document owner from the document, and assign it to this variable, and that will be copied to this variable. And in the participant tab, we can assign that. These are all some advanced workflow customizations, but we will see later in the class. But for now, we can assign it to roles or groups. Okay, this is a deadline. So as the name implies, when the activity should be completed after it is triggered. So I can say the user needs to complete this activity 3 days from the start of the activity. When this get initiated, then the countdown will start. Or I can say 3 days from the start of the parent process. The activity parent process is this workflow. The workflow itself is the parent process. So 3 days from the starting of the workflow. What should happen if it is overdue? So I can reassign to the responsible role here to complete the activity, or I can mark this activity as completed, so it will move forward, or I can send notification. So notification to the responsible role before the deadline. So I need to send 1 day before the deadline, or I can say 1 day after the deadline. So we are continuing our work with workflows for the folks who joined. Okay. Yes. So we are discussing about activity. First is the general properties about the activity, like the name. So activity is used to assign a work to a user in Windchill. Okay, this is where a user is going to perform a task. So all other options available here are system driven. Okay, this description about the activity. This is not the instruction to the user. This is the description about this activity, and instruction what the user needs to perform here. And participant who is going to perform this activity. Okay, if you have any questions about this, any of this selection, you always have this help icon. If you click that, it will directly take you to that specific help page, and you will know what this participant tab is about. Okay, so we can assign it to roles or groups. Most of the time, we'll use roles and groups, and in rare case, we use variables and independent users. Okay, let's assign it to a role. And this checkboxes if the user have to complete this task. If I say required, how many have to complete this task? Let's say the AER approver role has 5 users. Then if I say any, then if at least one complete the task, it will move forward. Or if I say all 5 has to complete the task. And also I can set a threshold value. So minimum how many has to complete the task before it moves forward. Say any. And this is where we stopped. So the deadline. So this is to send notification if it's coming due or it's past the deadline and what should happen, whether it's need to notify someone in the system or mark complete or reassign to the responsible role.
But bro, sorry, bro, can you zoom in your screen? It's very bit small. Yeah, perfect.
Okay. Okay. So this variables is used for workflow customization. I gave one example. So in the participant, we can also select variable. Let's say in the create document, I have an attribute called document owner. I can select a user from Windchill for this attribute value. Now I want this user to complete this task. So the value comes at runtime. How do we do it? We create a variable at the process level. If you go to the properties, I can create a variable here. The type should be WT user, and I should also create a variable at activity level and map this process variable uh, user attribute to this local attribute, then select that user part of the participant. We will see when we start our coding session. Okay, so this is the routing we saw in our previous class. What option the users will see? If I say none, they will only see complete task. They won't see any option to pick. If you see in this workflow, this is a test workflow we created in our last class. The approved design, the user who get this task will have two options. Either they can approve the task or they can send it to the clarify loop. So that's where we have the routings. So manual exclusive means they can select only one option. So it's going to be a radio button. If I say manual, then it's going to be checkbox. They can select more than one. Conditional means we can write a Java API. So it's going to validate some data backend and it will give a result. Based on that, it will automatically route it. So transitions. Transition is we can invoke Java API during the specific transition. Okay. Start means when this activity is started for the first time, I can invoke a Java API. And if it's enabled, I can invoke a Java API. If the task is terminated, if it is complete task. So all this transition, I can invoke, let's say when the user completes the task, I need to create some object backend. So I can write a Java API. So based on the selection, we can create some business objects behind the scene. Okay. So all these things required coding. So when we start our coding session, we'll see how we can invoke this API. Okay. So before we start the coding session, I want you to set up the VM, the Winchell VM workstation. Mahesh has successfully downloaded the VM and he has started the method server and it's up and running. So if you have any issues downloading the VM, please contact him or me. We will help you to set up the VM. And this VM requires 16 gigs RAM to run it because this is latest Winchell version. So uh, 16 is a good to have a RAM configuration. Means your base machines should have more than 16 gig RAM. So I have a 32 gig machine. So you won't have any issues when you start the VM. If you have 16 gigs, then try to reduce the RAM size to 8 and try to start it. It will be little slow, but it should work. But the minimum is 16 and the recommended is 32 for your base machine. So you need the VM setup, and I have configured Eclipse inside the VM. So then you can also code with me. So to get your muscle memory. And these are execution properties. Okay, let's go back to this activity thing. Do you need to record the voting? And if there is any variable change happening part of any Java APIs, then we need to record it. And what should happen if your Java API throws an error? Then abort this activity and can also notify the responsible role if there are any error. So all these are self-explanatory. You don't need to go in detail about this, and you always have the help icon. And this is a role setup. Let's say I need to assign some users to this responsible role, then that's where this role setup comes into play. Because whenever we create an object, let's create one object and well done. Now the workflow is triggered. You can always see your workflow from it doesn't have workflow. Okay, these are the roles added to this object. If I want to add some users to this roles, that's where we have this activity. Okay, if I say add, then the user who is performing this task will have a setup participant tab where they can add users to this roles. Okay, we'll see this when we create an object associated with this workflow. And resource pool is from where the system will get users for this participant rules. Usually it will be context team, so we're not going to change this. Okay. This is ad hoc activity. Let's say I have created this activity, but depends on my condition, I want to create more activities at runtime. That's where this ad hoc activity comes into play. But 99% of the time, we won't use this. So we're not going to discuss about this. Okay, block. So a block is a collection of activities. Let's say you have a complex workflow, because usually the workflows will be very complicated. Let me show you a sample workflow. Okay, so this is one of the workflow that we are using. Okay, it will be a little complex. Now I need to group some of this activity into a block to simplify it. Still, it will have all these connections, but I can make all these things inside a block. So the block, if I go back to the block, it will have its own start end process. So I can create the required activities inside it. Okay. I can connect it. So once the user completes this activity, it will go to the block, and inside whatever we have created inside this block, it will be triggered. So let's say I want to group all these things inside the block. I manually create everything inside the block, and after this activity, I will map this to the block, so it will be triggered just to keep your workflow clean. And this is a process. So a proxy process referencing an external workflow process. Mostly we won't use this, so don't want to discuss about this. Okay, and we have 4 connectors here. So mostly we'll be using this AND, OR, and conditional router. This threshold, we rarely use this. Okay, let's talk about the connector one by one. Okay, so the starting of the workflow, when I assign this to a document, when the document is created, all these 3 activities will be triggered. The unconnected, when it will trigger the activity 3 is when all these 3 activities are completed, then it will trigger the activity 3. Okay, so then it will trigger activity 3. It will wait for all the previous connection to be completed. It can be an activity, or it can be an expression robot. So all these 3 needs to be completed to start the activity 3. Then this link will fire. Our connector is, let's say the user completes this one. Okay. In this case, what will happen? So let's say the activity 4, 1, and expression robots are fired at the starting of the workflow. Okay, the expression will execute some expression robot is nothing but it will execute some Java APIs. If you go here, we can put our Java API here and it will run when this is getting triggered. Once it is triggered, it will immediately come to the R connector. And when activity 4 completes, it will come to the R connector. Still, it will wait for activity 1 to complete. But if the activity 1 gets completed, it will go to this R connector and it will immediately fire activity 3. It won't wait for the other activities. Let's say even if I have this one comes here, it won't wait for activity 4 to complete. So even one completion will trigger this branch. And conditional router. Here, we need to provide a routing expression. Let's clean this little. Okay. Now the user completes activity 1, then it will come to the conditional robot. Okay. You can name whatever routing events you want. You can create it here, and you need to give a Java API. So what the Java API is going to do is it will execute a backend code and it will decide which route it needs to take. Okay. So my condition, what it's going to do is I'm going to call a Java API. Okay. The Java API is going to return a string and I'm going to assign that string to this result variable. The return string is either create or update or delete. So based on what the API returns, it will choose the route. See, here we have an OR connector because it can only go to one of these 3 activities. So once this activity which is triggered gets completed, I want the activity 3 to start. If I put an unconnector, it will wait for the other 2 activities, which is not going to be fired. That's why we have OR connector here. Based on the requirements, we choose our connectors. And threshold connector. Once the user completes activity 3, it's going to fire all these 3 activities. Okay, so unconnector will wait for all these 3 activities to be completed, but threshold we can specify. Okay, once 2 of the previous activity gets completed, fire this branch. any two of this activity will fire this threshold connector, and it will start activity 12. Okay. So what is this? So this is the end flag. So once everything is completed, we will use the end flag to complete the workflow. So this will make the workflow complete. It will move the workflow from running state to complete state. And we have ground connectors. Let's delete this. This will help to close any open ends. So once the user completes the activity, it will trigger activity 13 and 14. The activity 14 will end the workflow, but we can't leave activity 13 open-ended. What should happen after the user completes activity 13? So that's where we use the ground connector. So it will uh, close the loop. Okay. So notification is if you want to send an email notification about something. Let's say I completed activity 12. So I can pick recipient, same users, roles, or groups, and message. So it will send an email notification to the participants. You can also include variables here. So from the properties, you can also include the variables here. So that will see once we started coding, just to send email notification to users about the status of the workflow. So method robot. So this is the robot we used to do a set state in our previous example. So what type of robot? There are a few options we can do. We can check in an object, check out, demote, deny, drop, promote, set state, submit. Mostly we'll use set state. So 90% of the time, we'll use this set state robot to change the state of the object. So let's say the object is in work. At the completion of this workflow, once all these activities are completed, we want to move the object from in work to released or any other state. We select which state we want to move the object, released, click OK. So now it will set the state of the object to released. Just give me a minute. Okay. The checkpoint is similar to notification. But let's say I completed this process, and this is one checkpoint. Okay, I need to send notification to the user that this checkpoint is reached. Then it will notify to the process initiator who has subscribed. Subscribe in the sense, go to this document. So any object we can subscribe. So any event happening on this project, you'll get a notification. Let's say if I say checkout, check-in. If someone else check out and check in this object, you will get a notification. And if someone deletes this, you'll get a notification. So based on events, can subscribe to different events. And anyone who subscribed to this document where this workflow is attached, they will get the notification about this checkpoint one is reached. This is timer robot. Okay. So let's say the notification is sent and the state is changed. It comes to the timer robot. So it will wait here. It won't do anything. It will just wait. So let's say if I want to wait for 30 minutes after we complete the set state, once it reaches here, it will wait for 30 minutes and it will start activity 4. It's to launch external application, but we won't use this. So this is the one robot we use most of the time. We are doing customization. This is used to invoke Java API. So once the set state released, then I want to release my part. Let's say I attach this workflow to a part. Usually Winchell is the upstream system and the downstream system is SAP or any ERP system. Once a part is matured enough, we want to send that part to ERP. So when the part is released, I can invoke a Java API to call the SAP endpoints to send this part to SAP or any Java API you can invoke. Okay, sync robot. So if you remember the change process, first we create problem report, then change request, then change notice, then change task. Okay, once we complete all the change task, the change notice will go to resolve state. And once the change notice goes to resolve state, the change request will be resolved. How the system knows that all the change tasks are completed. That's where we have this expression robot. So this will execute a Java API. Let's say I have this expression robot in change notice. Once all the change tasks are triggered, it will wait on this synchronized robot. And it will execute the APIs here, depends on event, say object event. Change notice, state change. Okay, so this will listen for the state change of the change notice. If the event is triggered in the system, then it will run this API to move the object from implementation to resolved. So if you want to invoke some code based on events happening in Winchell, like a checkout, check-in, state change, then you can use this. So URL robot. So if you want to access a HTML page inside your workflow, we use this URL robot. But the URL and the launch application is very rarely used or never used. Okay. I know this thing, all the things we see here, it will be a little overwhelming for you, but for the first time. But once you start working on workflows, so I'm going to give you some requirements. So you are going to design workflows for that requirement. Then you will know what these robots are actually. So we'll have some exercise once you set up your VM. So that's where I want all of you to set up the VM. So I can start giving you exercise. You can practice and you can start playing with this. You're going to create your own workflow, lifecycle, custom states, and going to use all these robots and other action items here, part of the requirement. Then you will know this. So you will have questions, come back to me or go to the help link. Then you will understand it. The more you practice, the more you understand. Any questions?
So bro, in the activity, right? So you said we can define multiple activity, right? So what is the SLS between these activities?
What? Can you repeat the question again, Mahesh?
No, in the activity, right? So for
Mhm.
the to complete an activity, so are there any SLAs like in this time of duration we need to complete this activity or it
That's
will
where
get
we
a
that's where we have deadlines.
so those are like predefined or will we
We
need
configure it. There is nothing predefined here. So let's say if I set 1 day, if I set here 1 day, so it will count. I mean, it will set the deadline from start of this activity. Not here. Let's say this one. To set 1 day here, it will set the deadline for this activity from the start of this activity. Okay. But if I set deadline here, it will set the deadline for this activity when this workflow is triggered. Because usually some workflows will take months and some will take years to complete. Depends on the business process.
yeah so in that case so what deadline we have to define because we don't know right so for that particular
It will
task
come from the business requirement.
okay
So everything is driven by business requirement. So workflow is nothing but to automate the business process. So whatever process the business follows, they're going to convert it here.
okay based on the requirement we set the deadlines right
Based on the requirement, we design this. Each and everything based on the requirement we design.
and each task how much time or duration it will take so those are also defined in the requirement
Yes.
okay
So everything you design here comes from the business requirement. So nothing is predefined here. Everything should come from business requirement. So which user needs to get assigned? Okay. I also told you, right? If it is required, whether one user completes this activity or more than one. So everything, if I say add roles here. So one user or all the user or set number of users. So everything should come from business requirement.
okay and uh, so how can we version control these workflow templates if I want to?
When you check out and check in a workflow, let's take this one, TBCT change notice workflow. So you say iteration history. It has 17 iterations. So every time the lifecycle is going to use the latest iteration of the workflow, but you can go back and see what was the first iteration.
Okay, and what if I want to go, like if suppose as you mentioned there are 17 iteration, right? So but I want to go back to 14th iteration and from there I want to do some modification. So is there a way that I can go back and start working from there?
Yeah, sure. So you do a save as, it will create a new template and you have to import that again.
Okay, the 14th one.
Yeah. You click this eyeball, it will directly take you to the 11th iteration. And from here, you can save this 11th iteration and you can re-import it to this TBCT change notice.
So so the iteration starts from beginning or like
No, it will create an 8th iteration. You cannot delete all those because that is the key thing. You cannot delete anything, any iterations here. We need to have that history. So you can take the 11th iteration and create it as the 18th iteration.
oh okay. But there won't be any graph, right? So from where I have taken this, so will there be any link like from
No,
11th I have?
it's not like GitHub. From here, you
Uh,
okay. So it works differently.
okay, Yeah, so I thought, similar way we can see.
But we never go back to previous iteration. We hardly go back and start from there.
Okay. And how about if I want to use a same copy and do some little modification, can I clone it?
Yeah, save as, right click, save as.
Actually, with a different name, and then I can
Hmm.
work on. Okay. So for the customization, you mentioned like we are using APIs, right? So apart from APIs, can we use other any scripting languages like uh, for
So
customization, or it only
you know,
supports API?
only Java.
Okay, only
Okay, so
Java.
the back end is Java. So we can't use any other language. For UI, we use multiple. Let's see what all the. Let's see. Usually, it will detect the Java libraries used, but the UI part still we use our MVC framework to develop all this UI. So you're not going to write any HTML code to build this table. We have APIs. And to control the view, we have JSPs. And for validation, we use JavaScript. So these three are key. And to perform some SQL queries, you need a basic SQL knowledge.
Okay.
Mahesh is a senior most developer in SQL, bro.
Yeah. No, no. I'm not a developer.
So I want you guys to set up your system because we need to go to the exercise part. I like to give you some exercise to try on your machine because just watching what I do is not going to help a lot. You need to do some hands-on. That's how you remember things. Find a good system and download the image and start working on that.
Monica, sorry, Manoj, bro. One quick question to Monica. Monica, what happened to your mission? Is it set up or no? Not yet. Monica.
Manoj, bro, I have a question. So you have shown the complex workflow, right?
Mm.
So in real time, do we have any tool or, to track the performance or optimize the workflow, something we use?
Hmm. Let's see.
So in real time, does we do any
So,
optimization of the
so
workflows?
there's nothing called optimization. Okay, so we design efficient workflow, but to check the health of the workflow, so if you go to the process manager, so this task is running.
Okay.
Wait, it's still spinning. It will give details about the workflow. See, we have a conditional robot here. It's going to invoke a Java API. The Java API is going to check few attributes on the object, and based on that, whether it will move the object to in progress, or it will create an activity, or it will close the object. That's where we have the conditional robot. And this expression robot is used to create some child objects for this complaint, customer experience. And this is this is where the user is going to perform the task. Okay, let's say I have this task here. So if I click it, it's going to show me the instruction, what I need to do. Enter eval details. Okay, it has some treating. So based on what I select here, it's going to create some child objects, and also it's going to take this route, what route it needs to take. So let's say in this screen, I say this is whether to determine if it's a complaint or not. I say it's not a complaint, so no further action is required. Then it will move to closed. And say if I say a complaint, and based on this, some additional activities. So if I say yes here, this task will be created. If I say no and yes here, it will go to set state in progress, and there is one more workflow attached to the in progress state that will trigger. If I say no and no, it will close the workflow and it will end it. I was about to show you something. Actually, our systems are a little slow, so that's why usually it will give the status of the workflow. All the things we see here will have a detailed information about all these activities and robots.
Okay.
Okay, guys, try to set up your machine at least by next week for our Thursday class. You don't need the machine, but starting next week, please have the system set up. So we have some hands-on. So this is completed. When it reaches the end flag, it will change the status from running to executed. Okay. So any questions from today's topic or any topic we discussed so far?
Yeah, I have last question. So if suppose there are two activities and the data needs to be shared between them, so we have to use variable, right?
What data you like to share?
Uh, let's
So,
suppose like
so this is the
password.
activity. Okay. So this is the activity.
Uh,
And what data you expect. So variables is used to calculate some runtime data are passed between two activities. So let's say I put a comments here, okay, and I want this comment uh, to be passed to the next activity.
okay.
So I put comments here for my activity, and I want this comment to come here. Then what I do, I create a variable here, string variable. When the user completes the activity, in the complete transition, I invoke a API. It will capture the comment and update this workflow variable with that comment. And I import that comment as a local variable here from this variable, and I display it in my instruction. The instruction, you can also include variables. So
Okay.
whatever the user put as a comment, it will come as an instruction here. So this is runtime. So whenever you want some runtime values, that's where we have variables.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, bro. I'm good.
Mm.
Okay, Manoj, thank you.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.